If you aren't already convinced that corporations control the federal government, then look at the administration's efforts to roll back fuel economy standards for cars. This entire initiative was created and drafted and executed by the fossil fuel industry, and the administration gave them a rubber stamp of approval. Now, Farron, I'd like to say that this is new, but it's not. It's called corporate capture. That's what's happening here. We used to have industry that was actually, they had to answer to somebody, but not anymore. Now you have regulatory agencies that really don't care if they answer. This story is particularly bothersome because it's being sold. Facebook, we're going to talk about Facebook a lot in the next few weeks, but Facebook is on that, they're the go-to people to sell the idea, and the idea, this is the talking point. We should have a car freedom agenda. We should be able to choose if we want to drive a gas guzzler, we ought to be able to do it. So now the fuel industry is secretly doing this. Real stealth operation the Koch brothers running through Facebook. What's your take on this story?
This is such a massive new report, and again, it's disappointing something like this doesn't get the coverage that it deserves. But what happened is that we had journalists who uncovered this massive scam. It was being run primarily by Marathon Oil with funding from the Koch brothers, going through the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. So you have all the major players out there, all of them out there, and what they're doing is they're going state by state, as one example, and helping draft legislation saying, hey, your state, don't you want to be able to choose what happens in your state rather than let those guys in D.C. decide for you? So here's what you do, and this, I think it was an 18-word bill they helped each state draft, was
drafted by the industry.
Right, by the industry and handed over to them, that essentially said, we're going to set our own fuel economy standards for our vehicles. So that was one path. The second one was that they wanted everybody in this country to submit a request to the EPA that says, allow us the freedom of choice, the freedom to pollute
that's the
more.
Facebook ad.
Right, and this was a Facebook ad.
Yeah.
They had two different ads. One of them had Obama in this evil-looking picture that said, would you buy a used car from this man? And the other one had Donald Trump looking heroic saying, support the president's freedom agenda.
Okay, let me talk about the bottom feeders. There's so many bottom feeders here. Besides, I mean, the Koch, we talk about Koch brothers, obviously you're talking about the bottom feeders. But there are a lot others here. You're talking about Ogilvy. Okay, the reason I know about Ogilvy, the PR firm, there is not, they go all the way back to tobacco. Now, here's what's interesting about this story. In tobacco, what Ogilvy is came up with this idea, the way we're going to let people keep killing themselves is to say, you have the choice. Remember that? Yeah. You know, remember the ads where they'd have the airplane and they had these people standing out on the wing of the airplane to smoke their cigarettes, right? And they were the point was you should be able to choose, by golly. If you want to kill yourself with a cancer stick, you ought to be able to do it. We actually saw the focus groups they did with this in the tobacco litigation. And this idea of you ought to be able to choose, no matter how stupid you are, if you want to, no matter what an ignoramus you are, you ought to be able to choose to be an ignoramus. So here, the same thing's happening. This Ogilvy that's getting all of this money and then pouring it into Facebook, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. There's a reason they're pouring it into Facebook, but they're pouring it into Facebook under a secret campaign, stealth campaign, and they're saying, you know what's so wrong about this is Obama wanted to make you choose the kind of car that you're driving. You shouldn't have to drive a Tesla if you don't want to. You shouldn't have to drive a Prius if you want to. If you want to drive a gas-guzzling Hummer, that's your right. The Constitution says that. That's the way they're selling it.
Well, what's interesting is I don't think people understand how bad the situation was before we, increased fuel economy, saying your vehicle has to get at least X amount of miles per gallon. Because down here in the South, the Hummers were everywhere. The big, massive, jacked up trucks were everywhere. Yeah. And they've been disappearing over the years because they can't, sell them anymore and they can't make them fuel efficient. So it made a big difference. I mean, those things were every time you turned a corner, you would find one.
It was always a guy, Bruce Willis, goatee, tough guy, shaved head, leather jacket. He wanted to choose to drive a Hummer. But that's the way Ogilvy has sold this thing. And the interesting thing is, the major place they used to sell it was Facebook. Facebook, this is really the real ugly side of it. Facebook is always talking about, we need to be responsible in this vehicle that we've created called Facebook. As a matter of fact, we're so responsible that we're going to prevent people from telling stories that we disagree with. It might be a right-wing story. We don't like right-wing, and you got some snowflake up in wherever they are making a decision. Oh, this offends me. We can't use that. So what ends up happening is Facebook now, they're gonna censor everybody that they don't like, but they're gonna let these pigs at the trough, the oil industry, who, by the way, if they get away with this, they get to sell an extra 400,000 barrels of oil a day. That's what this is about.
And if you do the math, actually, based on what the price of oil is going for today, that's more than $20 million in extra revenue for them every single day. So that's what's at stake here. That's why this is such a big deal. $20 million per day.
Yeah.
So if you make a campaign that only costs you $20 million to do this, you make that back in a single day when you're successful, and they have been. You mentioned Facebook here. It's important to note that when the EPA was accepting comments on whether or not to change the rule, over 3,000 of the 12,000 that they received it contained the same language that those Facebook ads contained.
Yeah.
So they crafted the message for these people. In fact, they auto-filled it. If you clicked on their little meme that they were sending around, all you had to do was add your name to the bottom and hit send, and that campaign worked brilliantly because Facebook said, well, you're paying us a lot of money, Marathon Oil, Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity, whoever you are. You're giving us tons of money. We know this is illegitimate. We know you're lying, but we're going to do it.
Google has reportedly killed the backbone of its controversial project to create a censored search engine for the Communist Party of China. The announcement comes after human rights groups and employees rose up in opposition to the project. RT correspondent Brigida Santos joins us now with the details. Brigida, first the obvious. Tell us about this secret search engine. What's it called, and what kind of information did it aim to censor?
This secret search engine, known as Project Dragonfly, is a mobile application built to be used on China's most popular operating system, which is Android. Now, if it had launched, the project would have impacted a vast majority of the country's internet users, whose main source of connectivity is through a mobile device. According to leaked documents, the search engine relied on a data analysis system to log common words and websites that the Chinese government could then blacklist from search queries. This means Chinese citizens wouldn't have been able to use the search engine to look up words like human rights, find information about historical events, including the Tiananmen Square massacre, access accurate data about air quality, and so on.
Isn't it remarkable that Google was even at the table talking to them about this? I mean, let's be honest. Google knew exactly where it was going to go. Google knew exactly how it would be used. And I wonder whether or not they've even created something like some variation of this to be used in the United States. There's certainly plenty of criticism right now. You have conservatives that are saying, yeah, they're kind of using the same kind of system to filter out anything that has to do with conservative discussion or maybe left-wing discussions that's considered too fanatical by Google. I don't know who Mr. Google is who makes those decisions, but it's interesting because you have to think maybe it went on here. How did Google employees help kill the main ingredient for this project, Brigida?
At the end of November, about 1,500 employees signed an open letter calling on Google to cancel the project and demanding more transparency about the ethical implications of their work. Prior to the leaks, most employees were completely unaware of the project's existence. Google's unofficial motto is "Don't be evil," so its decision to start working on the project in the first place is incredibly shocking, especially because Google completely pulled its search engine out of China in 2010 over government censorship. Thanks to backlash within the company, Google has now been forced to kill all work on the data analysis system that powered Project Dragonfly.
Well, you can bet one thing. Had there not been any kind of uprising even though Google understood, there's zero question that Google clearly understood what the ramifications of this would be. They understood Tiananmen Square. They understood what could happen. They understood what happened after Tiananmen Square revolt. They understood how many people were executed because of that. They understood this was going to be a way for the government to actually get involved in that process of censoring, not only censoring, but censoring and then hunting down the people who were responsible. But I find it remarkable that the leadership of Google even sat down at the table with these thugs to do that. Look, Google's CEO faced questions about the project. What were the key takeaways when he had to face those questions?
Last week, CEO Sundar Pichai told Congress he had no plans to launch a search engine for China, quote, right now. Now, he claimed Dragonfly was merely exploratory, but his testimony leaves the door open for a future launch, which leaked transcripts hinted could come sometime during the first quarter next year. So we're going to see in the coming months whether this project is really dead or not.
Well, this isn't the first time, Brigida, that Google employees have protested the company's involvement in controversial projects. As a matter of fact, I think you and I did a story similar to this just last year. But this isn't the first time that this has occurred, is it? I mean, we've seen it before.
No, it absolutely isn't. Employees had previously protested against Google's involvement in helping the Pentagon with an AI drone footage monitoring project. Google responded to those protests by vowing not to renew its contract after it expires next year. Now, it's really nice to see the workforce standing up against corporate tyranny. I would like to mention that, these people are wealthy. They're programmers at Google, a well-to-do company. They're making good money. It's not always the case with other companies that are committing these types of abuses.
Yeah, well, Brigida, I think we're just seeing the edge of this, because I think what's going to spring out from this is what else are they up to, because obviously they've developed a type of, they've developed the mechanism to do these kinds of searches, to factor in these types of searches. And I think people are going to be asking questions about, are they using it? How are they using it? Have we already been a victim of this in the United States and in other parts of the world? Thank you for joining, Brigida.
Every year, 1 million hernia surgeries are performed in the United States. Unfortunately, some mesh implants that are used in these surgeries have caused complications, including infection and organ damage that led to surgeries to correct those problems. If this has happened to you, learn more about the hernia mesh lawsuit by going online to hernia.law or call us for a free consultation about your legal rights.